everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. I think today we're going to be tackling something that probably all of us have struggled with at some point, and that is, really understanding our boss's management style. We've got a whole bunch of articles and research here. We're going to try to figure out why this even matters, and most importantly, I think give you some actual strategies to not only just survive, but to really thrive under any leadership style. I'll fully admit, I used to think that my old boss was personally out to get me. He was such a micromanager. But once I kind of figured out what made him tick, it turns out it was this deep fear of things going wrong. And once I realized that our whole dynamic just changed for the better. So let's get into it. What do we have in this stack of research that can help us decode our bosses and maybe even ourselves a little bit along the way?
Well, you know what I think is really fascinating here is that a lot of these sources are treating management styles almost like personality archetypes. And it's not about good or bad. It's more about recognizing patterns and tendencies so you can work with them in a way that really works.
Okay, so we're talking about personality architects for bosses. I like that. So what kind of boss personality types are we talking about here? What are some of the classic ones?
Yeah, the classics, right? So you see the transformational leader pop up a lot. This is the leader who's all about inspiring a shared vision. They're painting this picture of the future and they get everyone on board with their contagious enthusiasm.
Oh, yeah. I've definitely worked with a few of those. Big ideas, huge on motivation. But sometimes I'm just left thinking okay, but how do we actually get this done?
Exactly. And that's where understanding their style is so important. If you're working for someone like that, you need to connect your tasks to their big picture vision to get them to buy in. You'll be speaking their language.
That's a great tip. I wish I had known that a few jobs ago. So what other boss types are in this leadership lineup?
Well, you've got your transactional leaders. Think very clear expectations, rewards, consequences. They lay down the law and make sure everyone understands the rules of the game.
Very results-oriented. It's all about hitting those targets, meeting those deadlines. I bet they love spreadsheets.
Probably. And then for those who really thrive on independence, there's the laissez-faire leader. This is the hands-off approach, which can be amazing for people who want autonomy. But it can also feel like you've been thrown into the deep end with no floaties.
Okay, so freedom, but maybe a little too much freedom sometimes. How do you even know if you're on the right track with a boss like that?
That's a great question, and it shows why just knowing the name isn't enough. We'll get into more specific strategies for each style a little later, but let's round out these classic leadership archetypes with the authoritarian leader.
The my way or the highway type.
Right. This is the leader who is very much in command, expects things to be done a certain way, and there's not a lot of room for debate. Now, before anyone starts picturing a drill sergeant, remember, these are just models. Most leaders in real life are a blend of these different styles.
That's reassuring because I'm already thinking about my own boss and thinking well, they're a bit of this and a bit of that. It's never really so black and white, is it?
Exactly. It's about recognizing those dominant tendencies. And then here's the really important part. Figuring out how to tailor your approach to work best with them.
Okay, so how do we start to decode our own leader's unique management style? Where do we even begin?
It all starts with observation. Think about how your boss actually interacts with the team. Do they hover over every little detail, or do they give you space to work independently? Are they always checking in, or do they trust you to just get the job done?
So are they the type to micromanage, or are they more hands-off? I think we've all kind of experienced both ends of that spectrum at some point in our careers.
Exactly. And think about their communication style. Do they get all fired up when they're talking about big picture goals and long-term visions? Or are they way more focused on those immediate results and hitting those deadlines and the, nitty-gritty details?
Okay, so it's like we're playing detective, right? We're looking for clues in their everyday behavior and interactions. I kind of like that. That's fun. But let's be honest, some management styles are just more challenging to deal with than others. What about those bosses that are, shall we say, a little more intense?
Yeah, you're right. Some definitely require a bit more finesse. Let's take the micromanager as an example. This can be one of the trickiest types to work with, because it often feels like you're constantly under a microscope.
Ugh, I know that feeling. You're always second-guessing yourself, waiting for the other shoe to drop. So what's the best way to deal with a micromanager without, completely losing your sanity?
Well, instead of just reacting to that behavior, try to understand the why behind it. Why are they micromanaging? Is it a fear of failure, a lack of trust? Maybe they were burned in the past, or maybe their own boss is breathing down their neck.
So it's about empathy, right?
Yeah.
Trying to see things from their perspective. I never thought of it that way.
Exactly. And once you understand their motivations, you can tailor your approach accordingly. So, for example, if it's a trust issue, focus on building that rapport, demonstrate that you're reliable, and really go that extra mile to earn their confidence.
Okay, so it's like show them they don't need to micromanage you because you've got this.
Right. And sometimes the best way to manage up is to help your boss manage down. By being proactive and organized and communicative, you can actually make them feel more comfortable delegating and taking a step back.
That's a great point. It's about turning a potentially difficult dynamic into a collaborative one. But what about those leaders that are on the opposite end of the spectrum, the laissez-faire types? They're all about giving you freedom, but that can come with its own set of challenges too, right?
Absolutely. While autonomy can be super empowering, too much of it can lead to confusion and a lack of direction. It's almost like being given a blank canvas with no paintbrushes. You've got the freedom to create, but you need some guidance on how to even get started.
Okay. I'm starting to see how even a quote-unquote good leadership style can have its downsides if it's not the right fit for you or if they just take it too far. So what's the key to thriving under a laissez-faire leader then?
It's all about finding that balance between independence and accountability. You have the freedom to kind of shape your own path, but you also need to make sure you're staying aligned with the overall goals and expectations of the team.
So it's like being your own project manager in a way.
Yeah.
You got to set your own deadlines, track your own progress, and just make sure you're delivering what's expected of you.
Exactly. And it's also super crucial to build a strong network of support. Connect with mentors, colleagues, or even peers in your industry who can offer guidance advice and just be a sounding board for your ideas. Remember, working with a laissez-faire leader is all about being proactive and taking ownership of your own success.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, we've talked a lot about the practical strategies for, navigating these different management styles, but let's not forget about the emotional side of things. Working for a boss whose style clashes with yours can be seriously draining. I know I've had those moments where I'm just like, ugh, why can't they just be normal?
You're so right. Navigating these relationships isn't just about tactics. It's about emotional intelligence and resilience. We can't always choose our boss, but we can choose how we respond to them.
Okay, so how do we build that emotional resilience, especially when we're dealing with a boss who's not exactly the easiest to work with? Because let's be real. It's so easy to take things personally when you're already feeling stressed or under pressure.
Absolutely, but it starts with remembering that your boss's management style is a reflection of them, their own personality, their experiences, and yeah, maybe even their own insecurities. It's not necessarily a personal attack on you. They might not even realize how their style is impacting you.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I think it's easy to forget that they're human too, with their own baggage and their own quirks.
Exactly. And if you can detach yourself emotionally a little bit and view their behavior through a more objective lens, it can take a lot of the sting out of it. It's about focusing on what you can control. You can't control your boss's behavior, but you can control your own reactions, your work ethic, your attitude.
Okay, so it's about shifting our perspective, not letting their style dictate our own emotional state. That's powerful. But what about those times when it feels like no matter what you do, you just can't seem to win with your boss?
Yeah, those situations can be really tough. But that's where finding meaning in your work becomes so important. When you believe in the value of what you're doing, it becomes a lot easier to weather those storms, even when you're dealing with a difficult boss. It's about finding that deeper motivation that goes beyond just collecting a paycheck.
There's a great quote from one of the articles we have here. It says something like, cultivating a sense of purpose in your work can help you endure, even in the most challenging environments. It's so true.
It is when you have a clear sense of why you're doing what you're doing, it gives you this internal compass that can help you navigate even the most turbulent waters. It's about feeling connected to something bigger than yourself, finding that spark that ignites your passion and fuels your drive, and that can make all the difference.
That's beautifully put. So it's about finding that inner drive, that sense of purpose that helps us rise above the day-to-day challenges and frustrations. But what about those times when the situation just feels untenable, like no amount of reframing or positive thinking is going to fix it?
You're right. Sometimes it's more than just a personality clash or a stylistic difference. Sometimes it's a toxic situation, and it's important to recognize that.
Okay, so how do we know when it's time to throw in the towel? When is it more than just a difficult boss situation?
Well, it's a whole other deep dive.
Huh. Fair enough. We'll save that for another episode. But seriously, what are some red flags that maybe it's time to move on?
If you're consistently feeling undervalued or disrespected, or if your mental health is suffering because of the work environment, those are some pretty serious red flags.
Okay, so it's about knowing your worth and recognizing when a situation is no longer serving you. That's important. But let's just assume for now that we're dealing with a boss who, while maybe not perfect, is someone we can work with.
Right, because even with the most challenging leadership styles, there are always ways to make the relationship work, and that's what we're here to help you figure out.
Exactly. So as we move into the final part of our deep dive, let's shift gears and talk about some practical strategies for building a more positive and productive working relationship with our bosses, no matter their management style. Ready to get tactical?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay, so we've explored all these different leadership styles out there, from the big picture thinkers to the detail-oriented bosses and like everything in between. And we talked about understanding their motivations and building up our own emotional resilience and, even when it might be time to just move on. But now I think it's time to get down to brass tacks. What are some things we can actually do to improve our day-to-day interactions with our bosses, no matter what their style is?
Well, one of the most important things, no matter what kind of boss you have, is clear communication. And I don't just mean keeping them in the loop, although that's important too. It's about understanding how they prefer to communicate.
Oh, okay. So are they all about email? Or are they more face-to-face? Do they like to be super direct, or do they kind of beat around the bush?
Exactly. Some bosses, they love detailed reports, while others just want the bullet points. Some need constant reassurance, and others, they'd rather be left alone unless there's a major problem. So figuring out what makes them tick communication-wise can really save you a lot of headaches down the road.
Makes sense. It's all about speaking their language. So
Mhm.
clear communication check. What else can we do to kind of build that more positive working relationship?
Another key strategy, and this is especially important if you work with micromanagers or those authoritarian leaders, is setting clear boundaries. And I don't mean being confrontational or anything. It's more about being assertive and clear about what you need to be successful.
Okay, so it's this is what I need and this is how I work best. But how do you do that without stepping on anyone's toes?
Yeah.
Especially if your boss is, used to calling all the shots.
It's all about framing it in a way that benefits both of you. For example, if your boss is always blowing up your phone with emails after hours, you could say something like, I really want to make sure I'm giving you my full attention. So I set aside time each morning to go through all your requests and prioritize my day. Would be all right if we primarily communicate during work hours unless it's a real emergency?
Ah, so you're presenting it as a way to be more efficient and productive,
Mhm.
not like a personal complaint that's really smart. So what else can we do to manage up effectively?
This might sound a little counterintuitive, but one of the best ways to improve a tough relationship with your boss is to actually focus on their strengths. What are they really good at? What do they bring to the table?
Okay, so instead of dwelling on, all the things that bug us about them, we try to shift our focus to the positive stuff.
Hmm.
I can see how that could help, but what if their strengths just aren't that strong?
Even the most challenging bosses have some good qualities. Maybe they're incredibly organized, or they're great at networking, or they just have this knack for closing deals. By focusing on those strengths, you can start to appreciate what they bring to the team, even if they drive you crazy sometimes.
And maybe by focusing on their strengths, it makes us less sensitive to their weaknesses, like we're choosing to see the good instead of dwelling on the bad.
Exactly. And when you approach the relationship from a more positive angle, it can make your boss more open to your feedback and suggestions.
That makes sense. It's like disarming them with kindness. So we've got clear communication, setting boundaries, focusing on their strengths. Any other power moves we should add to our arsenal?
One final tip, and this might be the most important one, don't take it personally. Remember your boss's management style. It's a reflection of them, not you. They might be dealing with their own stresses or insecurities or pressure from their own boss.
Yeah, that's definitely easier said than done, especially when you're on the receiving end of a really harsh email or you just had a frustrating meeting. But I get it. It's about stepping back and realizing that it's not always about us.
Right, and it's about choosing to respond in a way that empowers you, not diminishes you.
Yeah.
You can't control their behavior, but you can control how you react.
I'm loving all this practical advice, but I have to ask, what if we've tried all the strategies we've done, all the reframing, and the relationship is still just plain toxic? What then?
You know what? That's a really important question, and honestly, it deserves its own deep dive.
Huh? All right, fair enough. We'll save that one for another episode. But for now, let's wrap things up with a little pep talk. What's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember? about dealing with their boss's management style?
I think the key takeaway here is this: you have way more power than you realize. You can't always choose your boss, but you can choose how you respond to them, how you communicate with them, and how you choose to see them. And by understanding their style, you can build a much more positive and productive working relationship, even if it's not always sunshine and rainbows.
I love that.
Yeah.
So it's not about chaining them. It's about empowering ourselves to make the situation work. And hey, even if things aren't perfect, there's always something we can learn from every boss we have, right? Good or bad.
Absolutely. Every boss, every experience, it's a chance for us to grow, to develop our own leadership skills, and to figure out what kind of leader we want to be.
That is such a great point. So to all of our listeners out there, remember, you got this. Go decode your boss, set those boundaries, and make that workplace just a little bit brighter. And if you need a little extra support along the way, you know where to find us. Until next time, happy diving.